So we got the NFL draft coming up this weekend. So today I'm going to be giving you guys sort of my final thoughts for the Saints draft, and mostly who I think, and mostly talk about, and mostly kind of say who I think could be the 8th overall pick for the Saints, top 10 8th overall pick. Now, of course, there's a lot of players, so really we're going to talk about a few players, but I'm going to be mainly talking about three players that are mostly sort of the top three players on the list for a lot of Saints fans, and also potentially for the Saints draft board as well, who could be drafted with that 8th overall pick. Now, of course, the other players I will talk about could be options as well. We'll talk about them first, and then we'll talk about the three, and then also later on we'll probably talk about some of the day two players, maybe a few of them, of mostly, of course, what would happen if we choose these certain players. That, of course, will probably be a little bit after. That's, of course, what we'll be going over in today's video. Of course, the draft is coming up. I am very excited to see who we get with this 8th overall pick. I'm very nervous, very excited. It's been a wild off-season so far to the start, and I can't wait to see how this draft goes, and can't wait to see how the rest of course, this off-season goes after the draft. But, of course, before we get into the video, make sure you guys hit that subscribe button and that notification bell for future upcoming videos here on the BrewCrew channel. Of course, I do football content like this, and I do wrestling content. And speaking of my wrestling content, if you guys have, of course, not seen my WrestleMania review videos, definitely go check those videos out. I'll leave a link to both of those videos in the description below for any of my wrestling fans. If you guys want to go check out those videos, definitely go do that. Now, with that being said, let's go ahead and go straight into the video. Of course, this is a big video, big thing to talk about, and that, of course, is who does the Saints draft with the 8th overall pick. Now, of course, there's a lot of players that they could pick with this 8th overall pick, but really it comes down to around 3 or 4 positions that the Saints need, that the Saints would potentially use. Now, the positions would be wide receiver, edge rusher, cornerback, and potentially linebacker. But linebacker is the low one. Of course, there's, of course, a couple of linebackers like Sonny Styles from Ohio State and David Bailey from Texas Tech. But kind of over time, they've kind of fallen out of potentially a lot of fans potentially wanting them to, of course, be a top 10 pick for, of course, the Saints. Mostly because, and I kind of agree, we kind of have an okay linebacker room right now, so I don't think we really need to waste a top 10 pick on a linebacker. We could pick a linebacker later on in day 2 or something like that. I would definitely, I mean, we could do that, and I would definitely not mind that, but as a first rounder, I guess I don't think we should take that risk, because I think the biggest needs are cornerback, edge rusher, and wide receiver, like I said before. Now, the previous players who I do not think see, of course, I'm kind of reading some of this stuff off of the Mock Draft Monday thing that, of course, the Saints have been doing on their website. Of course, they mostly, of course, look at last week's mock drafts, put them up together. The most from last week was, shockingly enough, Carnell Tate was the highest mocked player, behind him Ruben Bain and Monsieur Delane. Now, of course, I kind of spoiled of the 3 players that I am going to talk about, which are those 3 players specifically, but the players that could potentially not be the 8th overall pick kind of comes down to 3 players. 2 of them are wide receivers. One of them is another defensive back. Now, the other defensive back is, of course, Caleb Downs. Caleb Downs could be a draft player that we could draft, but he is definitely one of the top defensive backs in the draft, and he could be drafted before our 8th overall pick, so he probably won't be on the board when, of course, when our 8th overall pick comes. Now, the next 2 players could be the same way, but, of course, they are sort of behind Carnell Tate. But they could be the second option if Carnell Tate is drafted before 8th overall pick. That, of course, is Jordan Tyson and Mekhi Lemon from USC, Jordan Tyson from Arizona State. Both are the other top wide receivers in this draft class, and either wide receiver would be great because, of course, a wide receiver is a big-time need for this team, especially trying to get another second option, big-time option for Tyler Shough and pair him with Chris Olave. Now, of course, those are the other players that, of course, that could be drafted with the 8th overall pick. But let's talk about the 3 main players. I've kind of already said their names, but, of course, are Carnell Tate, Ruben Bain, and Monsieur Delane. Now, I've talked about Carnell Tate a little bit. We'll get more to him later on, but I want to talk about Monsieur Delane because he's been the most interesting. Now, mostly before the Combine, but before the combine and all that, and before this draft, he was mostly still projected as a first rounder, maybe as a high second rounder, as a potential high second rounder, but mostly as like a top 20, top 25 pick. I saw one pre combine mock draft saw him as like probably going to the Cowboys. But over time, especially after after his combine, after also I believe his pro day, he has been one of the top players, especially by Saints fans, that could be a high draft pick. Not only just Saints fans, a lot of other teams and a lot of other scouts and analysts I've definitely heard have been having Monster Delane as a potential riser in this draft class and could be higher than what people thought going into this draft and going into the combine, which is pretty great because Monster Delane is a lockdown corner. Now, of course, he didn't have flashy numbers with interceptions. He only had 2 interceptions his final year, which of course with us, but he was locked down with 11 pass deflections. Lockdown corner. I mean, that's a good, in my opinion, that's sort of a good thing you want to see and know that a cornerback is locked down when he is rarely being thrown to in games because of how good of a lockdown corner he is. 11 pass deflections is really great. Both interceptions were really critical interceptions in the games that he did pick off. And of course, he was among the top best defensive backs. He, of course, I believe, is the number one cornerback coming in to this draft class. So definitely picking him, not just solely because, oh, he plays for LSU, keep him in Louisiana. Like, no, he is a legitimate lockdown corner. And cornerback, I would not be shocked if we do him over the next 2 players I will talk about because cornerback is kind of the highest need, really, because you need help for Quincy Riley and Cole McKinstry, and adding Monster Delane as that number 3 corner would be big and would be amazing, especially for a young Monster Delane and have this young cornerback room. So I would love to see Monster Delane, who could be, if we're looking at defensive back, could be your second option if Caleb Downs, of course, is picked before your top number 8 pick. But let's look at the other 2 players. The second player is Ruben Bain Jr., the edge rusher, which of course is another high pick. Of course, we lost Cam Jordan to free agency. He has not yet gone to a team or anything. And of course, we don't really have that big of defensive line. Of course, Brian Brzee, who's mostly a defensive tackle, I believe we just gave him his 5th-year option. He is staying with the team, which is great. So you definitely need that edge rusher. So really, edge rusher and cornerback is the top 2 needs. And I would also see the potentially do Ruben Bain Jr., but he is such a big of a player that he could also be picked before the 8th overall pick. Now, really, there's not another edge rusher besides David Bailey, who I did accidentally say it was a linebacker. David Bailey could be a second option. The other linebacker would be Arvell Reese if we potentially do linebacker. But David Bailey is the other edge rusher. I'm sorry that I said linebacker. He's not a linebacker. He's an edge rusher. So it's either David Bailey or Ruben Bain. But those 2 have kind of been back and forth on a lot of draft boards and a lot of everything else that people have been talking about with the draft, with these 2 players, of which one is going to be taken first. A lot of people think Bailey's going to be taken first. Everybody thinks Bain's going to be taken first. So either way, one of those 2 players would work, but the highest really right now on this list is definitely Ruben Bain Jr., and I would love to see them get him if he is there for the taking, and if they want to get an edge rusher, they need to get Ruben Bain. But the final position, the final player, we kind of said his name before, is of course Carnell Tate. Now, Carnell Tate is by far the top best wide receiver right now in the class, along with Jordan Tyson and Mekhi Lemon. Now, out of the 3, I would really like us to get Carnell Tate, but like I said before when I was talking about Jordan Tyson and Malik Lemon, and Malik Lemon, if Carnell Tate, because of how great of a player he is and how top wide receiver he is, he could potentially be picked before the 8th overall pick if there's a team in need of a wide receiver, which I don't think there is, so it definitely could be a big time opportunity for us to try to snatch Carnell Tate if we want to take a risk on a first round wide receiver and pair him with Chris Olave and give another young target to Tyler Shook. Now, if we don't do Carnell Tate, I would be okay if we do still do wide receiver, but we do Jordan Tyson or Mekhi Lemon. As long as we do a wide receiver, I am going to be okay. It doesn't have to be a certain player. player, but I would like it to be Carnell Tate because of course, Carnell Tate literally being the number one player on our potential draft board. And was actually again, like I said before, the most mocked player drafted in a lot of mock drafts this past week, as I'm seeing here on uh on the Saints website of their mock drafts. He actually has the most in total with 117 total. So with him being the most mocked draft player, it could be a high draft. Now I know these are mock drafts, so really these don't really come to fruition a lot, really. But either way, any player on this mock draft that we have mock draft over the past few weeks, leading up to this draft, could of course be drafted. Now I do want to say there is the one player that before the combine, before everything, that a lot of people thought was going to be the bona fide first round pick was Jeremiah Love. Now, of course, I don't want to talk much more about Jeremiah Love, mostly because we don't need running back anymore. We got Travis Etienne. We potentially have Alvin Kamara coming back. So Jeremiah Love has kind of fallen out of being that top 10 pick for us, mostly also because we got Travis Etienne, and also Jeremiah Love might actually be closing in to be possibly a top 5, top 3 running back. Which of course is a risk. We've learned over time is a risk to take a running back in the top 3 or in the top 5 over the years. But yeah, Jeremiah Love has definitely fallen off because I remember, of course, before the combine, before we got Travis Etienne, he was the bona fide number one guy that a lot of people thought, along with Tate, Bain, and I think Monster Delane a little bit, and Downs as well, like, that was potentially going to be the number one draft pick for the Saints, but that kind of didn't go to it's not really going to fruition. But let's look at like day 2, day 3 players that could potentially be drafted later on. Now, of course, Chris Bell, the wide receiver out of Louisville, former teammate with Tyler Shook, is the top player in that category. Now, I do see us potentially getting Chris Bell if he's available, with whatever pick we have. If he is available, he is definitely the top player to go for if you don't go wide receiver in the first round. Like, let's say you go Ruben Bain. And possibly day 2, second round, possibly you go for Chris Bell. That is definitely how I see that going. Now, if Chris Bell's not there, there's a lot of course, other wide receivers. There's Jeremy Bernard from Alabama, Chris Brazzell the second from Tennessee, and I think that's it for wide receivers. So yeah, those are other wide receivers that could potentially be picked if, of course, we go not only just edge rusher, but we go cornerback as well. But if we do go edge rusher and, like, let's say cornerback, wide receiver, we go second round or somewhere in the day 2, and maybe third round, which, of course, I think is day 3, that could possibly be cornerback. Now, of course, the most mock draft second or third day cornerbacks, you got Indiana's D'Angelo Pons, and then, of course, Tennessee's Colton Hood, and then Arizona State's Keith Abanis the second, and then Texas's quarterback Malik Muhammad. So of course those are some players that could be drafted cornerback wise. Now of course there's a couple edge rushers as well. So let's say we don't go edge rusher in the first round, we go Monster Delane. Let's say there's of course edge rushers, but we potentially still go wide receiver the second round. Edge rushers that you could potentially look at, because you kind of still need to do an edge rusher no matter what round it is. There's, of course, Mason Thomas from Oklahoma. I think I saw there was another edge rusher. Cassius Howell from Texas A&M. And I think that's all of the edge. Oh, no, the final edge rusher, Macaulay Lawrence from UCF from Central Florida. So those are, of course, some of the top players, top positions that you could potentially see the Saints go for in day 2 or day 3, and of course who they could potentially do depending on what the first round pick goes. Now, to kind of go ahead and end it off, who do I think is, of course, the big question for this video. Who do I think, or who do I believe should be the number 1 pick for the Saints? Now, in my honest opinion, I would love it to be Monster Delane. I would love it to be Monster Delane because, yes, LSU, Saints, but he's one of the top best cornerbacks, and I think he is a sleeper cornerback, and I think he could be a big lockdown cornerback in the NFL. Carnell Tate would be great because he is a wide receiver, but we have a Cardinal Tate or any other wide receiver I would like. But in my honest opinion, I think Ruben Bain is the guy that we need to pick. If Ruben Bain is there available, here is kind of how I kind of would have it in order of most likely drafted to not least likely, but probably would be the final option if the next two are chosen before us. Are chosen before us, in my opinion. I think the top is Ruben Bain because we need an edge rusher. We need help on the defensive line. Yes, we could find that later on if we don't, but Ruben Bain is that player for us, and I think he needs to be the number one player. If he gets drafted before, there is of course Cardinal Tate, but there is also the worry for him. For you know what? Actually, no. Let me flip. Monster Delane is the second. Monster Delane is the second. And then, of course, Cardinal Tate is there. Now, mostly Cardinal Tate is at the bottom because I don't really have high hopes that he is going to be still there when our 8th overall pick comes. Because I think there is a couple teams before us that are interested in a wide receiver, especially like Cardinal Tate. Now, if Cardinal Tate gets taken and we don't do Mansour Delane, there's a good chance we could do a wide receiver, which, of course, that's where Micaiah Lemon or Jordan Tyson comes in. But I would like for us to potentially get a player that would help our team, that being, of course, Mansour Delane, if we don't get Cardinal Tate. So that's kind of how I potentially see it. Seeing highest player that I feel like that I would like for us to draft is Ruben Bain. Then, of course, potentially Mansour Delane. And then, of course, Cardinal Tate if those two are not there. And then, of course, if Cardinal Tate is not there, which, of course, is my bottom choice, is not there, there's, of course, Jordan Tyson, Micaiah Lemon, if you want to do that. There's, of course, the other players that I talked about if you don't want to go just that position or those two players. But in my opinion, Ruben Bain's my top choice, and I would like us to get Ruben Bain. But I would be okay with whoever we get because every player is a position that we need, so any player really would work. There, of course, is, though, how we draft the rest of the draft. So even though we could potentially get a pretty good, solid first-round pick, we need to kind of hit the rest of the draft as well. So there is that. So I think that's all I have for this video. If you made it all the way to this point in the video, thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know your guys' thoughts in the comments down below. Who do you think the Saints are going to draft? Is there any sleeper picks that the Saints could be looking at, that the Saints could pick? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below and everything else as well. Again, thank you guys so much for watching. If you made it all this way to the video, go check out, of course, the videos I did say before. If you guys are, for some of my wrestling fans who watch this, definitely go check out those videos. The WrestleMania review videos for Night 1 and Night 2. The links to both of those in the description below. And also in the description below, I will leave a link to my previous draft video, which, of course, I talked about potentially us drafting a tight end in the first round. It was mostly some stuff that came up that day when I made the video. Definitely go check it out. It's an interesting video. Definitely go check it out. I'll leave a link to that also in the description below. Again, thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys enjoyed the video, you guys know as always, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell for future upcoming videos here on the BrewCrew channel. And of course, I will try to do something after the draft, probably do like how did we do, kind of go over our draft class and all that, like I kind of did last year as well. So definitely make sure you guys have the notification bell on so you guys can be ready for that potential upcoming video. Now I'm going to go ahead and end it here. Hope you guys have an amazing, blessed day. And as always, I'll see you guys in the next video.